This episode is brought to you by Mortgage Workflow Partners and the Mastering Encompass series, both for users as well as administrators. You can find out all the information about it over at masteringencompass.com. Also, if you'd like to check out what we're doing on YouTube, go ahead and subscribe to the channel using the @MasteringEncompass handle. And make sure you stay up to date on all the information, not just with podcasts, but also video content that we bring to you as often as possible. Now let's get on to the episode. Hey everybody, Larry Bailey here with Mortgage Workflow Partners. We are live and another event at the mortgage community. Welcome, welcome, welcome. Thanks very much for coming, everybody. Hola, Chris. Hi, Katie. Today is November 14th. I wish it was October. It's warmer back then. We've got the Christmas decorations already up. Today's conversation is going to be all about the closer. Remember, every Tuesday we meet at 4 p.m. Eastern, and the plan is for the remainder of this year. On Tuesdays, we're going to be talking about role-specific conversations, and on Thursdays at 1 p.m. Eastern, so 4 p.m. Eastern on Tuesday and 1 p.m. Eastern on Thursday. Thursday is all about settings. Last Thursday, we talked about custom fields, which was awesome. We had a really good conversation. Today's closers, I don't know if anybody on this call actually has ever held a closer position. I'd love to see if anybody's ever been a closer. I was a closer for a hot second, and it's a hard job. It's a very hard job. Jolene was in post-closing, which is almost as hard, except you don't have people yelling at you for their closing package, even though you just got the package. And they're like, where's my package? You're like, dude, I just got the file. Craig's like, yep. That's about it. And that's the reality of a closer. So, today's conversation, Kayla says I covered for closing for like 6 months. Kayla, how was the experience? Chris says he sits near the closers. You hear about this all day. It's the truth. Katie's like, yeah, hurry up and wait. Listen, when it comes to being a closer, it's in some cases, it's more stressful than the underwriter role because you have to know what's happened on the file, especially if you have the kind of workflow where your team does the ICDs, the initial closing disclosure, and then they get the file back and the whole thing's changed, right? And so today I was going to go through a couple of basic topics. Topics I've got laid out for this conversation are closing conditions, talking about that, a closing summary form. Katie says I was smart and got out of my closing role during trade rollout. You missed all the fun, Katie. So the closing summary form and what that looks like, and how to fill in some of that information with field trigger business rules, as well as data templates specifically. The understanding between the aggregate setup and the CD page 4, because I think there's a lot of misunderstanding about that. The loan programs and how they're tied to closing doc plan codes. That's an important conversation. MAVENT, right? MAVENT. It's all about MAVENT when we're closing and the differences between preview and review. I've seen some gaps in that and how we can use it as a closer to make sure that we're closing a file without potential issues. The role in file contacts and where sending that file can sometimes create a problem on Loan Connect. We're going to talk about that. The use of a Proforma CD. So I'd love to hear from everybody about the Proforma CD. That's a big thing. And then the whole topic of pre-closing docs versus docs, especially with the persona updates and its 3 release. So that's the agenda. The idea of these conversations every week are to be collaborative. So if anybody has any particular stories they want to come up on stage and share, feel free. I'm going to do a screen share. So if you're listening to this on podcast, thank you very much. But make sure you get over to mortgage.community to watch the entire video replay, and you get to see the tree before all the Star Trek ornaments go up. I don't know if that'll be Thursday or the following or next week, but there will be Star Trek ornaments on there for everybody to enjoy. So let's go ahead and do a screen share. And again, I'll keep a good eye on the chat here. For those that are just showing up, today's all about the closer. So if you're a closer, or you were a closer, or you love a closer, and you want to find out more on how to make their lives better, easier, and less stressful, this is the place. This is definitely the place. So let me get my act together and share screen, the entire screen. I have an enterprise ornament that says live long and prosper when you push the button. Oh, Amy, I got you topped. I'm going to one-up you. What do you see? We'll have to do a competition. How's that? Can't wait. Yeah, me too. So on screen is the closing conditions. Now, everybody has this input form. It's as basic as you can get, right? And the idea is this field right here, this field 1952, this guy right here, that's where all your closing instructions go on your closing instructions letter. Now, if you're using standard closing instructions, you definitely will have standard language that goes in here, and it might be field specific or it might be purpose specific or whatever the case is, but definitely either updating this with a field trigger business rule, or you are applying information here in a data template. So John adds, which Katie concurs with, my team member that runs my help desk was a closer before coming to his team. He makes one heck of an admin, so I would assume all closers do, LOL. When you're a closer, you are handling high stress. You are typically a product of having to look everywhere inside of a loan file to figure out what's really going on. So your art of deduction is usually sharp. And you usually have to fix a whole bunch of everybody else's problems. And so that helps you understand how Encompass works, or at least how your Encompass works. So yeah, I can see that. I tend to find processors actually make, if I had to pick a role, processors usually stand out for me as solid Encompass admins, because again, same kind of thing. Not every company has closures that have to do everything, but usually processors, generically speaking, have to do everything. Again, take it for what it's worth. But the closing conditions thing I want to bring up is this goes straight out. And what's important to understand is this page plus symbol. If you're using standard conditions, this is what you're going to see. And what I wanted to draw to your attention was what this looks like when you're using enhanced conditions. You guys have heard me talk about enhanced conditions, not that one. Enhanced conditions for quite some time. That's the one I wanted. And so what it looks like here on screen, if you kind of put the standard conditions, and Christine's like, I agree with processors. Standard conditions on the left and enhanced conditions here on the right. The drop-down list for the condition set isn't necessarily what is only different, right? So if we bring up the actual selection here, you can see the condition set, how it's driven on the left, where it gives you that public directory and then you folderize it that kind of a way. The experience is a little bit different. What's really a call out here is you only get name and description because those are your condition sets. Whereas in enhanced conditions, you get the full boat here of your internal IDs, your condition names, your external description, and over on the right, there's a little bit extra. So again, this is another shout out for enhanced conditions. If it's not on your palette plate for 2024 to move to enhanced, definitely want you to, mostly because when you do get to closing and you are working with conditions and condition sets, you can build in a condition set specifically for closing, specifically for what the closer is allowed to clear or not, based upon the condition type, which you can fill into your condition sets. So if you want to go into detail over that, enhanced conditions, look it up. We did a whole thing on enhanced conditions. If there's more to talk about, let me know. But definitely use either field triggers to update 1952 or help your underwriters to clear out those conditions so that when you do select the radio button for add conditions from underwriters, in standard, you have to pick. And these are all the open conditions. In enhanced, they all just flow in. So your enhanced condition experience is, from my opinion, much better because if it's open, it goes, which is how it's supposed to be. So that kind of brings me to the next part, which is the aggregate setup. So I don't know if everybody understands this, but in the 2015 itemization, I see this a lot, usually in troubleshooting situations, where the CD page 4 isn't lining up to the 1003. And you've got something going on where you don't have your aggregate disbursement dates configured properly. So as an example, you've got no dates in here on screen, but you've got dates filled in here. Let me go ahead and take out those cushions also. Otherwise, it won't prove my point. So if we look at the itemization, we've got 2 months. I'm going to make taxes 5 months in here, and we've got nothing. We've got nothing set up in the aggregate setup. If we go over to CD page 4 and we scroll down, you'll see taxes escrowed and hazard insurance is not escrowed, even though back on the 2015 itemization, we've got an amount in there. It's right here. Everybody sees it on screen. It's right there. So the reason why this is happening is because the aggregate setup's not complete. So from a closer's perspective, if you're not watching, so one of the things you've got to watch for that I tend to do is to look at the reserves deposited. And then when I go to CD page 4, make sure that number is consistent with the reserves deposited, and making sure that the monthly escrows also line up. So as an administrator, I kind of make sure in the closing comparison input form that hopefully everybody's got. And if you don't got it, you should get it. Making sure that your closer has a really good sense of what's matching up without having to flip back and forth between pages and input forms. And that's really my biggest overarching theme here is, like you've heard me say to underwriting and to secondary, is to make sure your closer has some type of comparison input form to make sure that you don't have them flipping back and forth, because the more times they have to keep their eyes moving around, the more times they're going to have a chance of missing something, especially if the file leaves them and then comes back. Yeah, Angie. So it's the same methodology for any type of comparison form. So, I'm going to pull up the underwriter comparison. I'm making a scrunchy face, but yeah, like this, like I showed this last week on the underwriter conversation, but just pretend this is the closer. And so the closer has what fields are important for them. Things like cash to close, verified funds. Maybe you put on here open PTD conditions here at the top, on their custom input form, so they can see clearly how many open conditions there are inside the file if they don't have another summary form. But yeah, Angie, that's a recurring theme with me, is these comparison forms. Let me know if you have any more questions. If you want to come up and ask direct, please do. Because yeah, so for me, it's underwriting, secondary, and closing. Some companies will use processing. Depends on how you're running your company, but definitely that. And again, the difference between the aggregate and the itemization and the CD page 4. When I see trouble on a CD not lining up, or an underwriter having a fit because the borrower brought too much money to the table, it's usually because one of those things didn't line up. So I'm going to talk next about, Craig's got a question here typing up. As I move on, Craig, I want to talk next about closing loan programs and closing doc plan codes. So go ahead and throw your question up. So is closing comparison different than CD comparison? I don't know, Craig. I don't know what CD comparison is. Yeah. Oh yeah. I mean, I don't know if I have a CD. I don't really know what that is. Sorry, you mean like this thing? Yeah, it's kind of the same. I mean, this is a out of the box from Ellie Mae, 2017, right? Ellie Mae. So I started using these back in 2014 when I developed a lot of them for American Financial Resources. So I don't know, I don't know what this field is or the calculations, but it's all the same, guys. These comparison forms, I kind of take this and I take it up a level. because I want to make sure that you've got what's in the file. This looks like this might be tied to like CD page 3, and then this is something other custom field. So I'm not really sure how this works, but the idea is I don't really necessarily exclusively care about the CD. I care about the file, because for a closer, what typically happens is especially if they're doing the ICDs, the file will come to them, they'll prep it, they'll kind of get it in your mind. If you're a closer, I know you can speak to this, you'll get it in your mind of what this file is, and then it comes back to you to do the final CD, and you're like in a mood of what's supposed to happen, and all of a sudden you're like, wait, what the heck happened? Like, what changed? It could be loan amount, it could be program, it could be anything. And having the ability to document what the file looked like the last time you saw it versus what it is now is critically important. Critically important. So in the templates under programs, a lot of companies will tie in the loan program into a plan code, which is an e-disclosure, or they'll leave it blank. And the way that you kind of tell is this, right? So usually what I see is e-disclosure and plan type, and what I'm really looking for is closing docs. Candace asks, hadn't really thought about a closing comparison, have a secondary approval comparison. Another thing to add to my project list. Yeah, so Candace, I would tell you, just go ask your closer and be like, hey, what can I put on this form so that you can know what changed since the last time you saw it? And they'll give you 10 things, because those are the 10 things they're either making handwritten notes for, true story, or they're constantly flipping back and forth between disclosure tracking, or between history and documents, or history on the approval, or AUS findings, all these things. They're doing this right now. And so as an admin, you want to, make their lives better. So on the program, my advocacy is always to lock in a loan program into a closing doc plan code when you can. And so if you've got generic programs, but you've got investor-specific closing packages, first of all, why? But that's another story. Second of all, if it can be generic or it can be a one-to-one, do your closers a favor and lock in the plan code in the closing docs side over here. Lock in your closing doc plan code to your program. And the reason why this is important, again, is if the ICD goes out and there's a COC on the program changes, maybe it flips to, I don't know, some kind of special program that requires a special closing package. Your closer's in a rush because they just got the file, like we said at the beginning of this, and they have to close it like 10 minutes ago. Like the closing was at 4 o'clock and the closer just got the package now. Like that's never happened. Yeah, it's happened. It's probably happening right now somewhere. And they're in a rush. And so they go to send it out really quick. And but if you lock in the plan code to the program, there's zero chance they send out the wrong closing package. And yes, when you go to assuming you're doing a TRID loan, when you go to the Reg Z CD, you do have the ability to, when you go to order docs, it will do a plan code audit, but that doesn't mean anything other than when you go to pick a plan code, your closer is going to look at the loan file, or I should say Encompass is going to look at the loan file. And I got no plans available because I don't have closing plans. So it'll look at these here. And if it matches, it'll show up. And they have to go figure it out. So, and of course the Reg Z CD is not something you can customize. So unless you have a loan banner header or something like that, they have to then again have notes. Maybe you have a floating notes panel that they can refer to, but if they don't, you're just kind of hoping that they get it right. And so there's a better way, like align your closing doc plan codes with your loan programs. Again, keep the comments coming, keep the conversation coming, please. So the next thing is, as we don't have any questions on that, the next thing is the MAVENT preview versus review. So again, I don't know who knows what, so I just say it. The differences between an order and a preview is the order is meant to look at and run the rules for things that have already been disclosed. That's the whole point of the order. It's to say, hey, have any disclosure events on this file so far produced any potential errors that would be covered under the MAVENT rules? The preview is intentionally built to give your team the ability to know if there are going to be problems based upon the loan file and the rules. The biggest one, of course, is if you've got your points and fees maxed out, or if you've got an NMLS issue and a bunch of other reviews that will come up, in here, based upon what you have going. What it's not going to tell you is, pardon me, is if the disclosures you've already created are going to, overall have a problem in the loan file. That's the whole point of a preview. So hopefully in your workflow, my point is hopefully in your workflow, you've got something that says before any disclosure event happens, your team is running a preview MAVENT. If you're finding that the tests are not giving you what you're looking for, please work with ICE. You might just need a custom code. So if you go in your settings, in your additional services, and go to compliance review setup and go to change setup, out of the box, it comes with premium report. If you still have premium report, that's probably not a good thing, because typically companies want to at least exclude Sunday. Some companies want to also exclude Saturday. And so you would get a custom report code that excludes that. You also might have specific rules around your TILA RESPA for APR tolerance, or your total your total of payments tolerance for the 50 or 100. Anyway, if you haven't looked at these ever, I would encourage you to take time with your team, make sure your MAVENT results are coming back as expected, because that's something that, again, I found that sometimes gets misunderstood. People think it's running, so it's fine, and they don't even read it, whatever. If you've had a situation where you've created business rules, keep in mind it's a persona access to fields for the order docs button, whereas it's an FDE rule for the e-disclosure button. So Candace says, we've tried using a custom code for MI a while back, but then we lost something else that was in premium. Yeah, definitely work with ICE. MAVENT continues to, always change. So keep an eye on your MAVENT reports and definitely work closely with your ICE team. The compliance team at ICE, honestly, is second to none. I've always loved the compliance team. So I would definitely lean on them. If you have any questions, open up a case, put your question in writing. If you've got a citation to a regulation somewhere from your compliance team because they're concerned about something, ask them for the citation so that you can include that in your case so ICE can give you a written response. Hey, listen, while we're on the topic of producing packages, I want to talk about Proforma CD. So is anybody not using Proforma CD? And if you're not sure, check with your closers as soon as you're done with today. If you're not using Proforma CD, the Proforma CD is not out there by default. You need to go enable it for your team through user groups. But effectively, your Proforma CD is your draft CD. Back in the day, they would be called draft HUD ones, if you're as old as me. But right now, they're called Proforma. So notice I don't have it. Sorry, if I click on standard, it'd be a little bit more helpful. So in the Proforma here, right here, this guy. So it avoids lots of confusion. It also, because that's from Chris, it also avoids lots of disclosure tracking that you don't have to exclude. So again, this is what the Proforma CD looks like. And if you're not using this, change that today, please. What this means is that when you go into your disclosure tracking, you won't have all of these errant CDs that you have to exclude from timeline. You basically have the ICD and the final CD, unless you have a true COC CD or a post-consummation CD. That's it, 2 CDs in your disclosure timeline. Your compliance team will love it. And Kirsten says, absolutely, complete chaos if it's not used, LOL. And then Kristen says, we use it to send the settlement agent to approve. That's the only thing I do as a closer, is send that pro forma to all of my federal agents or attorneys and be like, hey, here it is. Luba does it now. Love you for that, Luba. Thanks for making that change. Your Encompass regulators will thank you. So definitely Proforma CD is the way to go. On that topic of sending packages, I do want to talk about this because I do find that this is an issue. In the act through Loan Connect, in the act of sending a closing package, the email address that receives that package in the role that it receives it first in is the role that you have to keep always. And I'll give you the real life example here. So if you're sending the pre-closing package, i.e. draft CD, to the title insurance company email, and then the same email is used in the settlement agent role, the settlement agent role will not be able to see the package because that same email address was first used by title insurance. So all that has to happen is if your closer is sending the ICD to one role, to that where that email address is, that's the role where everything has to go to. Lube, I see your question about a good way to add a custom print form to the package if none of the options. I'll have to. Can you give me a better question? Can you ask that a little bit differently? I'm not sure I follow your question. So my point is on here, I found a lot of times through Loan Connect where somebody's like, I can't get to the package. I can't see it. I clicked the link and I entered my thing and there's no package there. It's because the one that's not working is not where that was first used in the loan file for the same email. What you can do is go into the file contacts, find another role with the same email and send the package to that role. You could, Candace says you could open up a case with ICE and have it added to your package. Oh, you mean for your custom print form. Thanks, Candace. So 2 to 4 unit MI disclosure, we want it to be in a closing package. But yeah. So thanks for, Candace got the question. So yeah, if you're ever trying to add a custom print form into any package, not even closing, but any package, remember that if you don't see it in standard form, if you don't see it in your options, in your criteria here, so if it's not eligible in this criteria, like let's say it needed to be in the loan officer was Larry, yeah, you can't do it from here. Or in Luba's case, it's 2 to 4 unit, blah, blah, blah. Yeah, there's no unit count here. So if it doesn't exist here, to Candace's direction, I agree. Open up a case with ICE. You don't even need to open a case anymore. You can actually do as soon as you log in and go to the resource center on the left-hand side under forms, you can create a request that way. It's not a case. It's a doc request. You basically create the rule. You identify the name of the document and the document ID and explain if you want it added or suppressed. Remember that if it's a custom print form, oh, you already answered it, Luba. So if it's a custom print form, they have to own the custom print form, which means you're going to pay them to host your custom document, and you're going to pay them if you ever have to modify it. So if that's not okay, the only other way to do it is to print it to the e-folder and then add it manually. The closer has to manually add it, which is exactly what Kristen says. No, a suppression rule wouldn't work because it has to be added to, it's not a, you mean, well, so you could do a loan form printing rule, Luba. So in other words, you could add it to all your packages and then do a loan form printing suppression rule that says, I did not let you print this, but now your user is going to get this stupid message that says the following document couldn't be printed, and they're going to have to click OK. So definitely pick your poison, either pay, add it manually after it gets printed to the e-folder, or do your loan form printing rule and annoy your closers. The choice is yours. Last thing I wanted to bring up was pre-closing versus closing docs. So again, as a closer, if you're in the loan file and you're in the Reg Z CD, when you get to the order docs in 23.3, you have new persona features. So admins, make sure that you distinguish between the pre-closing docs actions and the closing docs actions. That's at the persona level. So make sure you've identified that in your personas. See if I can do this real quick before I run out of time. and Kristen adds, I added about 5 different forms for each closing because we didn't have them added for us. Yeah, it sucks, but it's what you got to do. So under the E folder, I lied. Forms, tools, nope, it's under loan, where closing docs is, Larry. So there you go. So there's your order pre-closing docs and what they can do. Here's your order closing docs and what they can do. This order pre-closing is brand new. So if you haven't already adjusted this, I would suggest you do, or at least be aware of it so you know what to do for your closers. And that's the alarm for me to be told it's been 30 minutes. I feel like I'm always rushing through these things. Does anybody have any questions? I know that, Candace, you said we were going to go over something, and I was going to ask you to keep me honest. We were going to do a thing about another, like an ad hoc meeting about something. So make sure we set that up. I just honestly forget what it is. Milestones. Yeah, I think you're right. It was milestones because we want to go through the milestone thing. So same thing here. If you guys want to keep talking about this, again, these are ideas to talk about in the community. If you want to keep the conversation going or do an ad hoc live thing, a hybrid closing time. Craig, hey, listen, I love the fact that you're doing hybrid e-close. I'd love for you to kind of, are you thinking about doing it, or you wanted to explain how you did it and you want to share your story with others? What's your direction there? Because if it's want to know where to begin. Where to begin, honestly, is first is finding out if your investors will have any problems buying a hybrid closing package. That's where you begin. It's all about your investors. And if your investors are Fannie Freddie, you already know the answer. They have no problem with it. You can do a full e-close with Fannie Freddie. But if you're not dealing directly with Fannie Freddie, if you're dealing with an aggregator, you got to start with your investors. So Craig, I would tell you start with that. And yeah, I think that's a great topic. I love the idea of moving to e-close, and I love the idea of using the Encompass e-close because it's integrated and it's there. So, gang, it's been a pleasure today. Again, I know I tried to squeeze it all in here in 30 minutes, but that's my point. So definitely, hopefully you got something out of this, and hopefully you make your closers' lives better, please. Because without a closer, you ain't getting paid. And so take care of them. Thanks, everybody. Have a great rest of your day. Enjoy and stay in touch through the community. Really appreciate it. Everybody have a great day. See you now. Bye-bye.